So a little while ago, I set out to play every single mainline Kirby game. And last time I was here, I played through the first 5 and gave my opinions on them. Some of them were absolute classics that I recommend that everyone should play at least once. And others were Dreamland 2. Today though, I'm just gonna talk about the next 3 games, while also putting them on the tier list I used last time. But I won't waste any time recapping, let's just begin. I was really hyped to play Kirby 64. I heard so many good things about it from other people, so I had my expectations a little bit high. So what are my thoughts on it? Well, there are a few special features that this game adds, and I like them a lot. Namely, the ability mixing. There are 7 copy abilities in this game, but you can combine them together to create something entirely new. You have no idea how fun it is to mix copy abilities together. Major shout out to this piss-off double-bladed lightsaber, it's really fun to use. I mean, there are some other ones that are kinda alright. The volcano was something I used quite a bit, and the explosive shurikens were alright, but a lot of them are just meh. They're mainly used for getting collectibles, which we'll get to that later, but they're fine. Another thing this game adds are Kirby's new friends. King Dedede can break debris with his hammer, Adeline can draw food to heal Kirby as well as give hints to some puzzles, and Waddle Dee steers the game into a more on-rails style. Like minecarts and stuff like that. I really like these sections. They really feel like a breath of fresh air. Especially since one of my main complaints for games like Dreamland 3 were the animal friends. As fun and cute as they were, I don't really think that they were used to their fullest potential. And that made me sad. In Kirby 64 though, they have entire sections dedicated to them. I like this a lot more than guessing what animal friend and or ability you need to fill a niche or poorly conveyed task. It takes time to center these sections around the varying gameplay styles, and I just really like that. Same thing with how all the characters hang out. After defeating a boss, it'll play a cutscene with the 5 of them just hanging out or getting into some antics. And it's just cute, okay? It really describes to me what characters they all are, despite the fact that none of them talk, and I just think that's cool. Also, Kirby using a cell phone is just funny to me. Now, how does the game play? It's fine. Kirby moves a bit slower than usual, even at their top running speed. But I think I could give it a pass here because the levels definitely make up for it. I mean, yeah, there's the standard grass, desert, water, and ice levels, which I'm honestly perfectly fine with, but there's stuff like shopping malls and factories. And I just think it gives the game a lot more depth. Speaking of depth, this game is on the N64. While other games found out what a Z-axis was, Kirby was still stuck on a 2D plane. Or like 2.5D if you want to be a nerd about it. And the camera does some pretty interesting stuff with it. I'm mainly talking about when you move and the camera angle slowly changes. It's small, but it's a nice touch regardless. The levels themselves... I might as well start talking about it now, right? So the main collectibles of this game are the crystal shards. There's 3 per stage, and just like Dreamland 2 and 3, you're required to collect all of them in order to get to the final boss. I don't know how this gets even worse, but you know what? Fine. Is what I would say if they were fun to collect. I mean, to be fair, there are some that are actually really interesting. Some of them you just need to explore a bit or have a nice eye, and others have walls blocking them. Now, to the game's credit, it does a really good job telling you what abilities you need to break these blocks, since the ability you need is corresponding with the color of the blocks. What I don't like is that the game just kinda expects you to know what abilities you need beforehand, and I swear some of the stages do not have the abilities you need to access these shards. And if they do, there's a good chance that they're inaccessible by the time you're already there. The biggest culprit of this is definitely the factory stage. There's a couple of blocks that could only be broken with the needle-stone combination. Stone is given right off the bat, but not needle. In fact, the enemy that would normally give you needle is nowhere to be found. This made the experience way more frustrating than it should have been. I had to play several levels several times just to get them all, so by the end I was pretty damn tired. But hey, at least the final boss is pretty cool. The first phase is Miracle Matter. It flips through multiple copy abilities, impervious to all of them with the exception of the one it's using. It's a little tricky and it got me a few times, but it's actually really fun. Then we got the true final boss 02. Anyone who mentions the anime girl will be shot. It shoots blood, which is still funny, this isn't a kid's game. You gotta dodge it while hitting 3 spots. The eye, then the head, then the... It was still really fun though. Also, Kirby fighting Eldritch Universal Threats is my weakness. B tier. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this game was genuinely some of the most fun I had in a while. I remember playing this game a lot when I was a kid, but I never beat it. Replaying it today made me have this really warm, nostalgic feeling, and I just like that. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is pretty different from other titles before and even after it. Instead of having a level-by-level platformer, it's kinda like a Metroidvania. The best way I can describe it is if the Great Cave Offensive subgame from Superstar was a full game. Amazing Mirror has 8 fully explorable regions. Each one of them has a boss guarding a mirror shard. Acquiring all of them opens a path to the final boss in the hub world. And these areas are massive too. You can't just run in one direction and expect to get to the end. There will be several times where you need to have a nice eye to find alternate paths, or areas that would be a lot easier if you had copy abilities. And I feel like it could really only work with a game like this. It's really easy to get lost in these areas, which can be annoying for a bit, especially when stuck in them for a long period of time, but as long as you acquire the map of that area, it's definitely possible. That's not to say you can't do it without the maps. I actually did it a couple times by accident. It's just simply easier, especially since they give you directions on how to get to other areas. And not only are these regions big, but they're really fun to explore. Except for Olive Ocean. I hate Olive Ocean, it sucks dead. They all have a unique identity that makes them stand out on their own. Mustard Mountain is a cliffside with a rocky-filled exterior and a lava-filled interior. Peppermint Palace is, well, a palace that's completely made out of ice. I could go on and on, but we'd be here all day. The big thing that was advertised for this game was that there are 3 additional Kirbys that accompany you. Kirby has a cell phone that can summon other Kirbys. It runs on batteries, which can be found throughout exploring. It's so funny because the AI for the other Kirbys are just not smart. Somehow worse than Superstar Helper AI, and they were pretty brain dead. They can do the basic stuff like attacking enemies or solving basic puzzles, but they die really easily, almost like they're intentionally trying to get themselves killed. Which is kinda depressing to think about. I really only called them for when I needed healing and because, hey man, Kirby with a phone. It's funny. As much as I love this game though, I did encounter a couple of problems replaying it. Namely the fact that copy abilities can be lost in one hit. This was a thing in other games, and I even pointed it out in some of those cases. But here, I'd say it's arguably worse. Rooms are more cramped and are filled with spikes, water, or pitfalls. There are also a lot more enemies. So if you're a little reckless when it comes to Kirby games, like myself, you can end up losing a lot. It's a little saddening, especially when you get a rare one and lose it, or if one was needed to access a certain point. I guess while we're on that topic, this game doesn't really have the robust movesets that Superstar does. I know that other games didn't have this, like 64 and the Dreamland trilogy, but those at least added gimmicks to enhance abilities. I mean, there are exceptions to this, namely Sword, Fighter, Hammer, and Smash Bros., but that's really it, and I kinda just wanted more. I know that in the grand scheme of the game, this is really just a nitpick, but it's kinda stinky. Just like the enemies. It feels like if the camera's off of them for like a millisecond, they just respawn. And considering that some enemies drop on you from the ceiling, it's kind of annoying. After collecting all 8 mirror shards, you can access the final boss from the hub world. Dark Meta Knight is the first phase, and he's pretty tricky, especially if you don't have a copy ability with you. The second phase is Dark Mind. He's kind of a pushover, especially if you have the Master Sword ability, which you probably, definitely will have. You just wipe the floor with him. After defeating him 4 times, he turns into this giant eyeball, and he has his own 2 phases, what the hell. First one is a pretty simple boss fight, and the final phase turns the game into a shoot 'em up, where after you defeat him, the credits immediately start rolling. Okay, that's pretty funny. All in all though, Amazing Mirror is a really good game. I had so much fun going through it, and if there is any game that I'd like to see be completely remade or have another game like it, it would be the Dreamland trilogy. But this game would be a close second. It's an S tier in my books. Oh look, you can customize your Kirby color. The fact that this is only in 2 games is frankly sinful. Kirby Squeak Squad is one of the video games of all time. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's bad, just empty. Because this is the DS game released in 2006, the bottom screen had to be implemented in some way. For Squeak Squad's case, it's Kirby's stomach. Okay. So throughout levels, you'll come across these bubbles, and grabbing one of them puts them in Kirby's stomach to be stored for later. It's essentially an inventory, and you know what? That's kinda cool. There's stuff like abilities or food that could be collected, and mixing them in the stomach can do varying effects. The collectibles in this game, the treasure chests, also take up inventory space. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. It incentivizes inventory management. Since there's a varying amount of chests in each stage, it makes you think about what is and isn't important if you want to take them all. The problem? Jesus Christ, your inventory space is ridiculously small. There are only 5 slots, which sounds fine, but it builds up really fast. Bubbles are everywhere in these stages. And hell, one of the new copy abilities revolves around turning enemies and items into bubbles. I think adding 1 or 2 more slots would have helped tremendously. Maybe even unlocking them over time would be nice. Speaking of unlockables, the chests are the main collectibles of this game. After completing a stage, all the chests you collected will give out certain rewards. Sometimes it's a new skill for a certain copy ability, other times it's a new coat of paint for Kirby. Again, the fact that this is only in 2 games is a sin, but overall it's pretty useful stuff, and they actually incentivize collecting them. Though alongside the small red chests, there are also these big silver chests. If you collect them, if your inventory isn't full, it will summon these mouse-like thieves called the Squeaks. They're perfect. The Squeaks were definitely the highlights playing this game. They turn the game into a chase sequence, and it's really great. The stages where they're in also revolve around their abilities. And the icing on the cake is the music that plays when they appear. It's all just great and I love it. The Squeaks are great, but as for the normal bosses, they're pretty bad. The bosses in this game are ludicrously easy, and that's saying a lot for a Kirby game. In other games, they weren't difficult, but they added spice in them that can make the fights more memorable. Most of the time. But here, a lot of them are just huge pushovers. Out of the 9 boss fights this game has, there are really only 3 that I can remember off the top of my head. Even the final boss was really disappointing, especially since the one before it set the stakes pretty high. You kinda just wail on him and then you're done. Look, I don't want this to come across as me hating Squeak Squad, because that isn't the case. I had quite a bit of fun playing it, but it felt lacking in comparison to the other games, and admittedly, I was kinda disappointed because of that. It's a very C-tier game. Oh look, the game wished me happy birthday.